Hello and welcome to another episode of Acts of the Blood God, an independent RPG podcast hosted by myself, Eric Van Allen, and Nadia Oxford. Nadia, how you doing?
I'm okay, but I think Kat left us alone again, so let's light something on fire.
No, we're just going to take it over this time. Well,
Okay.
we've been left alone enough. It's time to stage a coup. We're taking
Well,
command
someone's gotta.
of the podcast. No, Kat's out this week once again. Sailing the seas. What is our go-to?
I think she's sailing the seas of GDC,
That
which
would make
is an
sense.
interesting kind of sea, I have been told. I have never been to San Francisco, but I've been told it's a really nice city, except in certain parts, and one of those parts happens to be where GDC is. So I hope everyone's fine and staying safe, especially if you're someone from not of America. I mean that sincerely. Be safe.
Absolutely. Yeah. Travel safely, be safe. People who are traveling right now. Joining us though today to talk about our topic for the day, which is not traveling or staying safe. It is about the Yumia series, or the Atelier series, I should say. Sorry, the Atelier series, made by Gust. We were talking all about the classic crafting alchemical RPG series, and Lucas White is here to help us out. Lucas, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing pretty well. I'm happy to be here to talk about something kind of off the beaten path again.
That's where all the good crafting materials are, is right off the beaten path and down a dungeon and maybe at the end of a long hallway where you fought a boss. So that is what we're
Yeah.
here to do, is talk about the Atelier series and of course its newest entry, which is coming out next week, Atelier Yumia. But before we get to that, a little bit of housekeeping. Our monthly game club is still going on as Cyberpunk 2077. That's been popping off in the Discord lately. Nadia, you've been playing. How are you feeling about the game right now?
Oh, I have to get back to it because Monster Hunter hijacked everything. But yeah, so far I'm really enjoying it. It's different.
It's been a really fun one to like watch people experience for the first time, and I'm really looking forward to getting to the end of that game club and doing the Pantheon. I think we haven't done a like this recent of a game in a long time, right? It's
Right.
probably not since Yakuza Like a Dragon that we've had such a recent game in the Pantheon Game Club. And
Yeah.
I think if you talk about the games in the last decade that really end up defining RPGs moving forward, Cyberpunk is really up there. So it's going to be a fun one to talk about. Can't wait to do that. We also have the conclusion of the side quest poll, which went up earlier this week.
Oh yes.
It's going to be anime, and the anime is going to be Free Ren Beyond Journey's End. That will be our watch for the May side quest. We will be watching through all of the currently available episodes of Free Ren Beyond Journey's End. Criminal Justice is already in there saying this was the wrong choice.
I honestly don't know a whole lot about this anime. Why don't you explain the appeal to me?
Free Ren is, how do I describe this? I don't want to get too deep into it. I think the first episode does a really good job of setting up why it's such an interesting show and an interesting like angle on the normal fantasy story. But basically, Free Ren is a very long-lived elf who has never really had to think about the comings and goings of humans, right? And she's like, whatever, they do their thing, I do mine. And then she gets wrapped up in a very traditional, let's go slay the Demon King type quest with Himmel the hero and his adventuring band of friends. And all of a sudden, she's like, oh, I care about this, and they're going to get older, and I'm not. And I'll let the show take it from there. But
Sounds
if
very
you like,
cheerful.
if you like the setup of that, I think you're going to enjoy the general topic material of Free Ren. It gets into some really good stuff there. I know,
Well,
I know a
I
lot
do
of
like
people.
Dragonlance, so kind of have some of that going on there.
Yeah. I know a lot of people were hoping for a record of Lodos War. That was also in the running. It was second place, amazingly. There was a surging record of Lodos War contingent in the Discord trying to get that over, but maybe it'll pop up in another future vote.
Like
Makes
Gravity
sense
Falls.
because Friren's basically like builds off of some of the ideas that Lodos introduces.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool that like that ended up being the 1 and 2. They're very closely related. So if people like Friren, they should definitely go back and check out Lodos anyway.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We also have merch, shop.bloodgodpod.com. Go check it out. We've got a bunch of stuff up there for the 10th anniversary of the podcast. Heck yes. There's some great like buttons and stickers, a zip hoodie, a mug. I still have yet to get mine in, so I can't like showcase it. I know this is so bad. I'm not here to broadcast our own merch, but
That's how it
it
goes
looks
these days.
it looks fantastic. We've already seen people getting theirs and showing it off in the Discord. They have been enjoying it, so go check that out. Also, the newsletter is here and it's better than ever because there's twice as many of them. We have heard the calls for newsletters, the call for content, and now we are doing 2 newsletters. One is free and one is for the $5 and up patrons. So the $5 and up is going to be the ones that you have come to expect from Nadia, with a little bit of writing, a little bit of topical I don't know, what do you want to call it, punditry.
Yeah, it's something like that.
Yeah, and a musical selection each week. And then Tuesdays, that is when our smaller, more bullet point newsletter goes out. That's for everybody, whoever wants it. It's just kind of a roundup of what's going on lately in RPGs and also what we're up to at Blood God Pod. So if you want to check that out, go check that out. Please sign up for it. They're really good.
Yeah, I had a good essay this week about Chrono Trigger. And of course,
Yes.
everyone's talking about it because it's the 30th anniversary. But I talked about how I played the game half to death. And I was looking for that one last ending that I thought I was missing, because there was a mistranslation to make it seem that if there was a certain story point that could be tied up, but it couldn't. It was impossible. It was actually the point of Chrono Cross, and Chrono Trigger DS has reference to it as well. But for that time, it could not be done. But I thought it could because I found another secret where I thought it was related. But it's just basically me and my agony over being a gamer with the very beginnings of the internet, where people made up rumors for, as I put it in the newsletter, shits and giggles. So it's not like you could go there and ask a question and get a direct answer. You're going to get a liar. So I just suffered for a while, but at the same time, it was an interesting state of mind to just be like, what if, without having that answer right in front of me, thanks to the internet.
Yeah, go check that out. We also have Pantheon episodes. They're up for grabs. They're a la carte. They're not for free. Sorry, up for grabs makes it sound like you could just take them off the shelf. They're available a la carte if you want to go check that out on the Patreon. And of course, we are on Patreon, patreon.com/bloodgodpod. Go support us there if you like supporting independent media. But for now, we're going to talk about supporting the Atelier series with Lucas White. We're going to talk a little bit about a broad overview, I would say, of the series, what it is, kind of what the general vibe of this long-running, fairly niche, I would say, crafting, gathering RPG series is. And then we'll talk a little bit about Yumia. But to start us off, Lucas, give me like the top-down, what is Atelier and kind of what the appeal of Atelier is.
I need that too.
Yeah, so this is something that's been going on since like the late 90s. Started on the PlayStation. We didn't see it until much later, of course. But it's kind of like the primordial cozy game in a lot of ways. And we talk about crafting, so it's very heavy on crafting. And it's not just like most RPGs of that time where it's like you smack 2 items together and you get like a better sword early or whatever. It's like you go out and you pick flowers and you fight enemies and get what they drop, and you break boulders and maybe you go fishing and you get all these ingredients, and they have like just stats on stats on stats, and you cram all these things together to make just about anything you need, whether it's like healing items, weapons, other items you'll use in battle, equipment, stuff related to the story. And then the other side of that is there's usually like some kind of time limit oriented goal. Historically, it's like, oh, I want to be the best alchemist. I'm in the Alchemy Academy or whatever. So it's like you have until this time to pass your final test. And that's kind of like the whole game. Usually there's not like a big conflict or antagonist. It's very kind of happy-go-lucky and silly. And then over time, you kind of get the audience builds. It gets bigger, comes over to the west, so you get the more friction averse portion of video game players involved, and so they're like, time limits. Whoa, that's too much.
That's me.
I mean, it's me too, honestly. so like that gets kind of scrubbed out over time as it gets more popular. You start to get stories get a little more complicated. Bad guys and stuff show up. You get, especially recently, they kind of transition from like hopping to different spots on a map to find ingredients, to like kind of zones, almost like an older Monster Hunter game, and then now they're just full on open world. They've transitioned from regular turn-based combat to something much more kind of real-timey, and as they've really found success, especially with the Ryza games, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit about, they've just been really trying to be like, oh, okay, we have something now. Time to turn it into the video game, the video game that has all of this stuff you could possibly do in it, and that's kind of where we're at with Yumia.
I feel like looking at some of the early Atelier stuff versus later, especially when you talk about those frictive elements that kind of get sanded down a little bit over time, it reminds me a little bit of Pikmin for some reason. The idea that like if you played Pikmin 1, it was a very challenging, almost like I could see shades of Druaga and Mystery Dungeon in there, of like having to push against so many different obstacles and timers and things like that, just challenges in the way of getting it done. But by Pikmin 4, my understanding of Pikmin 4, I've only played up through 3, but a lot of that stuff has been kind of made to be a little bit more open, less aggressive towards the player. I don't want to call it like malevolent or malicious or anything, but definitely like less frictive. Yeah.
I
definitely
have to admit to you, I have one. Like, I don't know anything about Atelier, so I'm glad you're here, but I have one Atelier song on my playlist, and I don't know where it belongs, but I'll tell you the name. And you'll know it. Schwarzweiss?
I think so, yeah.
The thing is Iris. And the reason I have that song is because it's by Revo, I think, who did the songs for Bravely Default. It's a great song. I love it. But that's all I got for you.
So then...
Yeah, I mean, these games are like really colorful. They're pretty. The art is always really nice to look at. The music is very pleasant. Like the vibes are off the charts for these games. For sure.
Yeah, so you'd say like the main appeal of Atelier is just the vibes, the gathering, the alchemy. That's kind of always at the heart of it.
Yeah, it's like that, and then you kind of, depending on who you are, there's this transition to like the metagame, where it's like, how much can you just break the bejesus out of this game?
Sounds like an Eric game.
It's like, okay, the joke's always like, usually there's like an early part of the game where it's like, you need to combine this like kind of spiny plant from this tree with something else, and you make a little bomb, and it's like a little cartoon bomb. It's like a big black circle with a string coming out. I was like, oh, this is cute. It solves the mission, and then you can kind of like throw it at enemies. But then by the end of the game, it's like, how many numbers could I get to come out of this silly little bomb with all of the garbage I dumped into it? Yeah. It's like by the end, it's like you've got your little Looney Tunes thing that could probably like level a city, and like all the characters are all happy and smiley, and
you make it out of stuff that's around. So it's like a Katamari almost. That
you're like cooking WMDs in your little cauldron in your cottage. Basically, it's like the.
Sure, we just got a report.
So Yumia is coming out next week. It's the first time I've really sat down and played an Atelier game, but that was, I think I was messaging you, Lucas, and I was like, I'm so obsessed with just taking this really basic item I have, but it all has components, so I have to put like, say, an ingot in there to like level it up to give it additional traits or something. Well, what if I made the ingot myself and then filled the ingot with all this stuff that had extra abilities, extra attunements, extra everything. So now this thing's way better than your normal one. And then that can feed into the next one, which can feed into the next one. And you end up building this thing where it's like, I broke it all down into components, and all the matter is there again. But in all the little gaps between the molecules, I put in, I don't know, like fire elements and things like that. Now it's just an evil weapon made out of something very
just
basic.
Made a Star Bomba in your basement.
Yeah,
It's just this massive chain, and like as you get better, like your alchemy skills, you'll find stronger and stronger ingredients. And so it's like your item is made of like 3 other items, which each of those is made of like 2 or 3 other items, and it just goes back and back. And then as you get better, you can even be like, I'm just gonna stick with this thing I made, and I'm just gonna go back and like remake all the pieces of it instead of just making new ones. Like that's how in depth it can go.
So this series has been running for a very long time. 1997, I believe, with Atelier Marie, The Alchemist of Salzburg was kind of the starting point. Every atelier has, as you told me, a different location, a largely a new protagonist, unless it's a numbered sequel, but it's very unlinked, I believe, in most ways. It's like Final Fantasy, where things are kind of like, oh, this is a new place, new thing. We're not really going to touch anything. It's not Trails, right?
Exactly.
That's good to know. So you can kind of jump in anywhere, like even with the new game.
Yeah, and they have like if there is like a group of related games, they'll usually like bundle them together quite often.
Right.
Yeah, like one of the series I like is the Dusk series, and you have to import it, but there's a couple of Switch collections where it's like those 3 games on one little Switch cartridge, and it's in English because it's like Southeast Asia or whatever. But you can also get them on the eShop, and they don't go super on sale that often because Koei Tecmo just doesn't roll that way. But usually they're pretty good about like, these are the ones that are related and within each other, and they do the work for you.
So where would you say a good jumping on point is for the Atelier series?
Ryza 100%.
Which is that on? Is it on console or is it on PC only?
That is on everything. Ryza, notably, it was interesting because like that was also kind of around when the Switch came out. I don't know if it's 1-1, but very close. And it was like one of the first Switch games, I think, that was just going out of print really fast and selling out.
Right. There was a demand at that time. Everything lucky enough to release in that window got some pretty good numbers.
Yeah, it was like every 3 months you'd see Wario64 posting about Atelier, and it's like, what universe did we just slip into? Everyone's like, oh, gotta get Ryza, is back in stock. But it's just like something about that game, A, being on the Switch at that time was just like an instant boost. But B, it's like they really hit like a perfect blend of like, here's the fun characters, and like the story they're doing is kind of interesting. Here's like the systems that are really streamlined. Don't have the time limit. It's a little more opened up. The gameplay is like right in between turn-based and more experimental, especially for the sequels. So they really just hit a sweet spot, and it feels like it really kind of blew up, relatively speaking. But yeah, I would say those games for sure. It really seemed like Yumia was going to be like a new, easier, better, more definitive like starting point. Or at least that's what they were kind of going for. But after having played it, I'm not so sure about that anymore.
Yeah, we should talk for a bit now about Yumia. So we've talked about the series up to this point, and it feels weird to talk about all that because I feel like for Yumia we have to be like, okay, put all that to the side because Yumia is
just about all of it.
A lot of new stuff, a lot of new ideas. This is them. From my understanding, go check out RPG site if you want to read more about this. But they had a feature and an interview with the developers over there about why Yumia kind of is the way it is going into the release of it. But this is them going, okay, well, Ryza was really big. Ryza made Atelier super popular. But we also know that popularity does not last. So Yumia is going to be a big swing to try and get new players in, especially it seems like Western players. I feel like there's a lot of ideas of not even Western players, but like really popular games. I can see shades of really popular games in Yumia in ways that kind of surprise me. I see shades of Breath of the Wild and Genshin Impact, that sort of design that has become the thing that people make when they want to make a successful game. And in all those ways, I do think Yumia does have some really interesting concepts about what it does. I'm not sure if it's live at the moment, but I have an article going up at some point that's like Yumia feels like, what if you took a survival game and pinned a JRPG to it, right? Here are all these systems that you expect from kind of, I don't know, the forest or something like that, going and picking up resources and building a base and trying to kind of expand outwards. Or Valheim. Valheim's probably actually like a really good comparison point. But it's in like an RPG world that feels cozy, feels slice of lifey, fantasy, like all those sorts of things. It's not, you're not going to get raided by some random roving band of teenagers like in Rust.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
And that,
Giving all your money.
I found that super interesting, but also from everything I understood up to that point and from everything you've been telling me, Lucas, it sounds pretty different from what we have normally come to expect from Atelier as a series.
Yeah. So there is kind of a through line with Ryza leading into this. Like you can see as that trilogy develops, they start moving in that direction. But here, like you said, it's just like they're like, okay, we were kind of moving in this direction, experimenting with stuff. Now we're gonna like swing the bat as hard as we can. So they just fully commit to like, all right, this is open world. You are doing all kinds of tasks and quests, and you're running around and filling in this map and going to your, Assassin's Creed tower type spots. We're completely abandoning turn-based combat as a concept here. And of course all the building and stuff. That's also something that they were kind of playing with it, and they're like, all right, here it is. So it is very, very different. It still looks like an Atelier game. It still sounds and feels like an Atelier game, but in terms of like all the systems and mechanics and structure of it, it's definitely like a new step.
Yeah, it feels like an interesting game for them to try and build on, for Gus to try and build on moving forward, because it is so, I don't know, it feels even different from other RPGs, and that feels weird to say. Like I think the combat is something I keep going back to, because combat is a really interesting novel hybrid of action and like ATB systems, where you have these charging abilities that you kind of execute and try to combo. I almost look to like Valkyrie Profile as something to point out there too, of like, here are these buttons you have that you can press in certain orders to do combos and build up like specific meters with each character. I think, was it Yumia can enhance some of her abilities as she combos up and stuff like that. I never like got too deep into that stuff, because I'll be honest, the combat has some challenge, but hasn't felt like it's pushed me to use it in a way that I have to like really pay attention to the systems. I can kind of just hit buttons and get away with that, and then do my weakness attack and get the friend action and all that. But it's never really pushed me to like pay super close attention to how all of the individual character mechanics work. But I look at like that combat system versus the turn-based stuff in Ryza, and it does feel like it's a really interesting direction for them to take that series. But I'm also really curious about how it ends up feeling now, because I just kind of walked away like, that was neat, that was interesting, that was novel, but I don't know that it did a lot for me in terms of offering really interesting combat.
Yeah, it's very it's something I kind of see happening and kind of starts and stops a lot with RPGs, the sort of real-time approach, where it's like it feels like Claire Obscura is kind of playing with this stuff a little bit. It reminds me of like Lightning Returns a little bit.
Where it's
like your character's there and you're not just running around like you're playing a full-on character action game. But you are in control, and you do have like defensive options, so you can like block and you can dodge, and that's really important.
You're in like these rings where you can move in or out and stuff like that, or sidestep and try to dodge, and they do cool things with that. Like I think one of my actual frustrations with the combat is that the cooler abilities that you have are locked behind the skill tree, and so you have these friend actions, which are everybody has their main weapon that they can use, but then they can also hold alchemical weapons that Yumia, the main character, makes. And if you stagger an enemy and then hit them with an alchemical weapon that is like their weakness, your friend will follow up and you'll do like an extra bonus attack. And that's a really sick system. Or like the other one that's like, if you get a perfect evade and you get the bullet time effect, then you can hit the not friend action, but it's like perfect counter or whatever, where your friend suddenly is like, oh, I'm tagging in, and they do an attack. Kind of like, it reminded me of Tales of Arise and things like that. And that feels really cool and really interesting. But I didn't unlock them for a very long time because I was spending all my skill tree points on synthesis and gathering and stuff like that. And so I was like, oh, the combat's pretty basic. I don't really have like cool tools. I'm getting these like perfect evades, but I don't know what the point of doing them is besides looking cool. And it was like, oh, the point for doing them, like the reward for doing them, you have to go unlock in the skill tree. And I don't feel like the game really points you in that direction. It says like, hey, you might want this. You might be interested in what we have over here in this branch.
Yeah, in general, the game's really uninterested in like pushing you. We talked about time limits and stuff earlier. That's obviously not the case here. All the systems we mentioned, building and stuff, most of it is up to you, really, how much you engage with it, right? Even alchemy, it's like there's always a do it for me button.
Someone else do it. Can't someone else do it?
Yeah, it's like they want to give you all these options, they want to have all these things going on, but they also don't want to like feel like they're telling you what to do to a certain extent. Like freedom is a really big deal, but I think as a consequence, like I noticed there's stuff. Eric, you were really into filling in the exploration list.
Yeah, I like the checklist. I think that's like my Death Stranding love surfacing, being like, ooh, I love it when they give me a checklist of go fight this enemy, go do this thing, go establish campsites, go craft this thing and place it somewhere in a campsite, and then you fill that out and get rewards as you build it up. That part is like, that was making my brain itch in a good way, or scratching my brain in a good way. Yeah.
And there's like rewards associated with that like change the game. Like when you fill out that first list, you get your bullet upgrade that can let you, break certain obstacles down. And it's like that would be stuff I think in other games that you would just get as part of like going through the story, right?
Yeah.
Instead, it's like very optional and like buried under other stuff. And because it's such a busy game and there's so much going on, the fact that it has like mechanical changes and additional features and stuff kind of hidden behind things that there's no telling, when you'll actually get around to seeing it. It could be like, well, I'm, pretty much done with the story now. Let me go back and fill stuff in. And it's like, oh, that's how I get that thing.
I think we were having some conversations like that this last week of like, how does this work? How did this happen? Oh, that was something that like I could have engaged with about 20 to 30 hours ago, but I guess I'll just now discover it. I do find that really, really interesting because I think there are cool parts to it. And I mean, the main appeal of this game to me, like the biggest upsides were having that pioneering chart, having the goals, and kind of being sent out into the world and saying, go. I mean, I was so into the open world exploration that the 8th laboratory, which is one of the early bases that you can clear out for, we should probably talk about what the story of this game is, but just broadly. You are the research team, which is exploring an unknown land. If this sounds really similar to Monster Hunter Wilds, it is kind of a similar story to Monster Hunter Wilds. It's very funny. I mean, it's got Hunter x Hunter inspiration all over it and stuff like that too, but you are kind of out here in this land trying to deal with the mana bound areas. There's like this blue fog haze everywhere that is toxic to people over time, but Yumia is an alchemist, and alchemists are bad in this world. Alchemists bad. No, we don't like alchemists because they realized, as Lucas mentioned earlier, they can make the WMD in the cauldron. So maybe we shouldn't have them around. But Yumia wants to be a good alchemist and like help people. And so she is out here with this research team to try and dispel the fog and make these lands livable for the normal humans that live there. And so you go into these areas and you have these bases that have these like pedestals that clear out the zone and make them less dangerous and stuff like that. Before the game even told me how to use those pedestals, I went and explored an entire base that you were supposed to do as part of the story or as part of the main progression of the game. And I was just like, no, I want to explore. And then I was like, I'm standing here and this pedestal looks like it should do something. I feel like I should be able to do something here, but I hadn't progressed the story far enough to actually be able to engage with it. And I think that's one of the weirder parts is the story gating in this game gets kind of in the way of the open world exploration where you find these really cool things and you just want to keep following your fancy out into the wilds. But then it's like, oh, you need to nudge the story forward before you can do that. And I'm not saying I dislike the story or I'm avoiding the story. I think it's fine. It's a solid, it's not the best. It's not the worst, but I think the systems of the alchemy, the systems of crafting, the systems of building give it this really interesting framework that then gets held back by the fact that there are gates that have to pop up every so often to be like, no, you should go back and do this quest real quick. So now we can advance forward and move you to the next region, give you the tools, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that unfortunately people forget about Breath of the Wild design is the fact that Link can, once he's off the Great Plateau, he can go face Ganon in his underwear if he wants to.
Exactly, yeah.
Nothing's stopping you. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, a lot of open worlds, they do gate them like that, and it's like, hey, you have to do that, man.
Yeah, it's a game that wants to do all of the things at once.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And maybe doesn't have the bandwidth to really pull that off.
By the sounds of it, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not super deep in the game. I'm about 15 hours in. I was only writing up impressions for this and then talking about it on the podcast. Lucas, I believe you have fully reviewed this game for Shack News, if I remember correctly.
News.
Yeah. So go check that out if you want. But Lucas, I'm told that later in the game, there is a motorcycle. Can you tell me about the motorcycle?
The motorcycle is so sick. So one of the things about this game that really hit for me is just the way it moves. Everything is kind of Yumia has this like little, I don't know what you call it. It's just like a little jar of like mana juice. And
are we talking about Flommy or are we talking about the other thing?
The other thing.
Okay.
This little, I forget what she calls it, but it's like your
it's like your thing that protects basically. Her from the mana bound. Yeah. It's like the little orb thing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I thought you were talking about Flommy, like the little alchemical helper that follows you around and just like chirps in to say sarcastic things every now and then and be like Snarky Jarvis. I like that little guy.
The robot bomb. That's what it's got the tube coming out.
Oh my god!
I
hadn't seen it until now.
No, what is? It's like it's got the little eyes. It's like an item in Mario, except it's got a big head coming out of it.
Like that's how we make the alchemy. That's how we mix.
Like, I get that it's a lamp, but it doesn't look like a lamp. Anyway.
Oh no.
So you've got this like resource that basically gives her these like extra abilities, and the way it's designed is really cool. Like she's got these like tubes. Like, she's wearing high heels, and the stem part are these tubes, and they're basically like little rocket boosters. So that's how you can like double and triple jump. If you fall, she'll like activate some crazy stuff, and it'll like absorb the fall damage as long as you've got your mana juice. She has a magic staff that looks like a normal magic staff until she turns it sideways, and all of a sudden it's a musket, and you like shoot stuff. And
gun staff.
It's also like a machine gun. And,
like you do.
Yeah, like in battle, she'll like jump in the air and twirl around, and there's just bullets everywhere. It's so cool. Eventually, you get a motorcycle, and it's like it's a fun example of like how alchemy is kind of represented in these games, where she just finds like this beat up piece of junk kind of under some things, and she's like, well, that's interesting, I wonder if I can fix it somehow. And then through alchemy, you put it together and improvise a little bit, and plug the bong into it, and then it powers the motorcycle.
That's
The
how it
bong
works. Yeah.
is symbolism
That's how it
for
works.
the creative process.
You know
when
what
you're
would really
on your
bring
high.
this Harley together is a bong.
It's so funny. She's literally like, I couldn't figure out like how to start it, so I just plug Flammy into the side, and that's how it goes. But this
Hot
thing,
wiring your car so it runs on a bong.
You've heard of
Pretty
liquid
much,
cooling.
yeah.
Now check out.
Oh my god.
But apparently it can do like really. I saw somewhere that can like wall jump or something.
Yeah. So
Holy shit.
it's another thing where it's like there's another sort of not a skill tree, but just a little progression thing where you find these gimmicks around the world and you can kind of plug them into like increasing your mana juice allotment, or like mess with the penalty if your party gets wiped out. And another one's like, oh, you have the motorcycle now, so here's a third tier, and you can translate what Yumia can do herself into the motorcycle. So it's like you can, click the left stick to dash, you upgrade the motorcycle, then you can boost the motorcycle the same way. She can kind of kickflip up walls. Well, now the motorcycle can do it. It's so sick to just like you cruising around the open world on this motorcycle, and maybe you're backtracking and you don't have to pay as much attention to where you're going. Then it's like, oh, there's like a hill in the way. Let me just use the motorcycle to kick over it, like I'm playing Super Mario 64, but like the F-Zero ROM hack version. And it's just like everything about the way you just kind of run around and fight enemies and just do stuff in the game. It's all very over the top in like a really fun way. And like all the stuff she does, it's like kind of this like bright red purple color, so that's always kind of like blowing up all over her when she's flipping around and stuff. That does a lot for me.
I do find that the designs, like you were talking about earlier with the motorcycle, with Yumia, it's this really interesting imagination of like science and fantasy blending together, sort of like what if the magical and the improbable was actually conceivable if we have the right kind of both magic and fantasy elements to kind of create meaning and logic out of them. And I really, really like that about this world. Like you said, the rocket boots are awesome, and so is the gun staff, but even just being able to concoct all these alchemical weapons and then equip your party members with them and add effects to them and build that stuff up over time is really, really cool and really interesting. And I really like that about this game. But, like I said earlier, I think the story is fine. It's okay. I don't know. It's really difficult to talk too much about because I still feel like I'm fairly early on. I've run into one dude who showed up and was like, I'm a bad guy. I'm the bad guy.
Sharktooth boy.
I'm here. Oh, it's not even a Sharktooth boy that eventually joins your party. It's like you end up in a place and there's this dude. And he's like, I'm here to do plot things, and I'm like, oh yeah, you look like a bad guy. You look like a mid boss type dude, and you have a really cool fight scene and all this cool stuff happens. But then afterwards, I was like, still don't really know what the whole direction of this game is going to be, and I kind of feel like I'm just pushing forward to gather things and continue to build big dumb buildings at all my campsites and construct giant weird monstrosities with the building tools and find more things to make weapons. But I don't know, the story is really pushing me forward. Does it do that for you, Lucas? Or
no? I think my kind of response to it is just it feels really vague the whole time.
Yeah.
Like it starts with this really fun, like kind of in media res thing where you're like running through a dungeon and stuff's falling down around you, and you run into bad guys there, and it's like a fun way to introduce you to the mechanics, and then it sort of backs up afterwards and kind of sets the story up, but not really. But then it's like, all right, off you go to do the video game stuff. And it just really doesn't, like, I don't think a game necessarily needs to, like, vomit all of the details out at you all the time. But I feel like it really kind of stumbles through, like, onboarding you into what is even going on. Like, it's, It's not really clear even like who you are. Like you're in this research group, but it's like, are you like with the government? Are you
It's not like
I was
Monster
gonna
Hunter, which is established.
Yeah, I
What
was
you
gonna
are and
ask
what.
you. I felt like the beginning part where it's like, why is Yumia part of this? I feel like they explain it at some point, but it's not super well explained. They're just kind of like, well, she's got to be
Yeah.
here if we're gonna do the video game about this. So like, let's all suspend this part of the disbelief. And I'm not gonna like CinemaSins ding that or whatever, but I think it makes the character feel less rounded out in the process. And so
Yeah.
I was kind of hopeful that was going to improve over time. It sounds like it might not.
No, it's definitely got like a really awkward cadence to it.
Okay.
Which is a shame because like I think the premise, like you're in this area that's like it's very, you know, Breath of the Wildy, like you said. It's the latest grass and piano game.
I
But
like
like the
that.
whole thing is it's like the reason it looks bad is because there was a alchemy related disaster, and there was like they set up there like there was an empire here, and that was kind of where everyone worked for before. But alchemy blew it all up, and now we're kind of back here to kind of maybe try to figure out what happened, but also explore, but also do other things, kind of maybe. And then, like you said, Yumia is there, and they don't like alchemy, but she's also just like there, and they're kind of like, well, this sucks, but I guess you can be here anyway. And they're like, her mom was an alchemist, and it's like, how is nobody really is like talking about like, was it a problem your mom was an alchemist? Like the timeline's really unclear.
Yeah.
And then like these other characters come in and they have their own stuff going on, and that kind of gets rolled out kind of awkwardly. Like your two initial party members are just kind of there, and then they kind of get like it's just. I think we were talking about like how the story kind of gates the open world stuff. It almost feels like maybe there was a struggle to like figure out that balance of like we want to have our Atelier traditional story, but we want to have this open world stuff. We're trying to cram it all together, and maybe the pieces just didn't quite like click together.
I think a lot of times it feels like there's two different video games fighting it out in here. There's a traditional style RPG that has some novel approach to its combat systems, and then there's a open world collectathon. Not even collectathon. It's not like Banjo-Kazooie, but it's like but it's like a it's like a crafting and gathering extravaganza. It's go find stuff, bring it back, build your base. I actually this might sound weird to people who have played the game or are going to play the game. I like the building stuff. I know it's super finicky. It is not like the easiest tools to build with, and multiple times you'll be trying to like put a fence up and make the fence connect to another piece of fence, and you're just like, line up, come on, like, there it is. It's always a little askew. Yeah. But there's a part of me that still really loves it, and they give you a lot of tools for having like a prefab of like, here is a basic shack that you could just pop down. And there's something I really like about games that let you go into a zone, establish a little campsite, build it up, and then have like choices about what goes there. Dark Cloud, basically. I love Dark Cloud. Yeah. And so I like that stuff a lot, but that at times feels like it is a different game that then has to it's severed. It's a severed game. You have like, you're doing the open world survival, Breath of the Wild, Genshin. Really, Genshin. It reminds me of Genshin a lot more in a lot of ways, just in the way it handles and moves. But go do this, and then we're gonna jump over here, and we're gonna do the RPG stuff, and then we're gonna go back to the other stuff. And it even at times says, "Hey, go work on your pioneering chart, go get up to this level, go figure this stuff out, and then come back, and then we'll let you advance a little bit further." And yeah, it just feels like it jumps around so much. I think you said earlier that it was the game that tries to do everything, and it really is trying to do a lot, and a lot that should appeal. And I don't even think that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think this is a bad game, but you can tell that it feels pulled in different directions.
Yeah, it's got this vibe of like, oh crap, we're like a big deal now, so now we have to go like try to box with Fortnite.
Oh God, don't do that, please. You're all right. You're
Everybody
okay on your
wants
own,
to
honey.
fight Fortnite. It's crazy. Atelier Yumia, it's coming out soon. I believe March 21st is the release date. Reviews are out. It's doing pretty well. What do we think this is going to do for Atelier as a series, though? Lucas, do you feel like this is going to kind of elevate the public consciousness around Atelier? Do you think it's becoming less niche, or do you feel like it's still kind of in the same place it's always been?
It's really hard to tell. I think Ryza did a lot for the series.
Yeah.
And I think that, especially lately, we have seen in games that there are ceilings. And I think that developers and publishers should be realistic about acknowledging those ceilings. And I think generally Koei Tecmo is one of the better places that does that already. And I think that's why they have so many series that have survived 20 plus years, like this one and others. I don't think this has the natural kind of like oomph, the it factor, I guess, that Ryza kind of had. So I don't know if it'll be able to make the same kind of impact. It feels like it'll be like, this is a cool, 7 or 8 out of 10 for most places, probably. RPG, it's got a lot going on for it, but it doesn't like go blah and like make a giant splash. It is on Xbox now for the first time. If that, I don't know.
Okay.
It's
That's
impossible
wild.
to tell if that
Xbox.
means anything, but yeah. I think it's solid. I think Atelier fans will probably be pretty happy with it. And I think just being on every platform will probably do a lot for it.
Yeah, that always helps.
Yeah.
Do you still think I was going to ask, do you still think a newcomer to the series, do you think they should go back to Ryza, or do you think Yumia could also be something that they would want to jump on with?
I think it could be. Like, I think if someone goes into a store and they're like, oh, I heard about them Ateliers out there. I'll try this one because it's the new one. Like, there's nothing's going to backfire in that way. So I think, like, looking at it, I don't know, functionally, I guess, like, it's a fine stepping on point. But I really do think, like, if you've been hearing about Atelier games for a while and you're just like, oh, I don't know where to start, like, just forget about being there for the new one and just play Ryza because it's awesome. And you have 2 other games. It's a really, really well-built trilogy in like a narrative sense. So just like do yourself a favor and start there and then check out the other games afterwards if you like it. But yeah.
That's what I would do.
Yeah. Well, Atelier Yumia out March 21st. As for Atelier Ryza and many other games, they are out now. I believe also possibly in the spring sale. I think at least Ryza 1 was fairly discounted in the Steam sale. So if you want to go check those out, maybe want to do so at a discounted price that is out there too. And there's a demo on the way too for Yumia, so you can also go check that out and poke around at that. And I think that's probably a good way of getting a sense if this game is for you, if it's going to scratch that itch or not. But yeah, in a very crowded year, I think I'm glad I finally got the time to sit down and pay attention to the Atelier series. I think even if Yumia didn't light my world on fire, I think I understand the vibe. I still think Rune Factory is what ultimately I look for in this space. I don't know why, but those 2 series kind of run very parallel in my minds. But maybe if you enjoy Rune Factory, you might end up enjoying Atelier too. I feel like there's some common ground there. So go check that out. That is it for our Atelier section, the one that the people have been clamoring for. All of you who have DM'd me over the years and said, when are we talking about Atelier on Blood God? Now I can point to this.
We did it.
That'll do it for our main show section. And now let's do a series of random encounters. Saber Interactive, who's ostensibly working on the KOTOR remake, says everything that we have talked about is still in development.
Yeah, okay, sure.
There are no airbenders in Ba Sing Se. Niantic plans to sell Pokemon Go to Scopely, makers of Monopoly Go. Pokemon.
I don't know what to say about that.
Got that
I mean,
salty bag, baby.
Yeah,
I
no, that's
play Pokemon Go. I probably still will play Pokemon Go. Everything's owned by terrible people now. I don't even know where to start. So,
yeah,
True.
yeah.
True.
When I wrote "Welp," and that's kind of my
well,
thoughts about that. Yep.
rich
Yeah.
people get richer. Good for them. That's what counts, I suppose.
The one
Yeah.
cool about that thing, the one cool thing about it is they stressed that like the whole team made it over. We didn't acquire
Thank
Pokemon
God.
Go and fire
Yeah.
everyone. It's yeah.
I
So that
do
was-
hope that some stability there at least.
yeah.
Pokemon TCG Pocket will overhaul its trade system at some point, including the complete removal of trade tokens in favor of Shine Dust. But the changes are due to be implemented at an indeterminate time by some point this year, I believe, is the general window. So it's going to change, but it's not changed right now. Sorry. Assassin's Creed Shadows, though, will work on Steam Deck after all. Fun fact. Apparently, the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion remake is reportedly due for an imminent reveal. This feels like back when the Metroid Prime remaster was bouncing around and it felt like every other week it was like, it's coming soon. It's going to happen. BlizzCon is skipping 2025 but will return in 2026. Disco Elysium studio Zaum put out a teaser for its own disco successor, C4, a psychedelic espionage thriller. 4 is also seemingly the number of successors from former Disco Elysium devs that seem to be in the works. It's a little joke from me to you.
The Disco Elysium snafu was just that's Disco Elysium 2. That's it right there. That's
Now
the
let me
game.
take a big swig of coffee and read this next one. Disco Elysium is getting a mobile version, which looks actually kind of neat, IMO. But then the studio head went out there and said, "We intend to captivate the TikTok user with quick hits of compelling story, art, and audio, ultimately creating an all-new, deeply engaging form of entertainment."
Yeah, the exact opposite of what Disco Elysium is about. Maybe that's the sequel. Maybe us all being trolled by this piece of crap is the sequel.
Yeah, as the chat is saying right now. Oof. Yeah.
That's not disco at all. That's not very disco of you.
I had this listed as a potential tavern talk, so we can use this to wheel on into the tavern, fall through the front door of it. So here's the thing. I've seen the teaser video that's out there that kind of shows what their vision for the visual interface of Disco Elysium on a phone would look like. And I actually think it's kind of interesting. It looks very point and click adventure-y. It turns a lot of those dialogue systems into more kind of phone manageable systems, which is interesting because original Disco Elysium, for those who played it, will remember it had kind of a blog scroll feed on the right that almost looked like a Twitter feed at times. It like reminded me of that, but that was kind of how the dialogue like displays in the game. And so they have kind of alternate to or altered it to this like, I don't know, like swiping sort of thing where you roll the die and kind of move through stuff, and it looks a little bit more like a visual novel in that way. But I am intrigued by that. But then they go out there and they say, well, we want the TikTok user to love this. And I'm like, uh-oh.
Selling the ICQs out. Yeah, that's what kind of gets me. It's like, okay, you want to put this on mobile? Sure, why not? You want to make it for the TikTok generation? I mean, I have nothing against Gen Z at all, Gen Alpha. Like, they are screwed. Good luck to you kids. I'm sorry it's really this bad, but TikTok, Disco Elysium is not really meant for TikTok, Riz, swag, Oklahoma, whatever they say these days.
Oklahoma?
No, not Oklahoma. It's like Chicago. Oh, Ohio. Skibbity, Ohio, whatever that means.
Skibbity, Ohio?
I don't know. It's some Gen Z thing, Gen Z. I don't know.
Nadia,
I just don't know.
Your knowledge of internet always fascinates me because the other week we learned that you didn't know what Problems Clown was, and that like upset me on a spiritual level. You needed to know about the Problems Clown.
I did learn about the Problems Clown, and now I'm very informed about the Problems Clown. I'm like, is that kind of some sort of like local 58 analog horror thing? But no, the Problems Clown is. Why don't you explain the Problems Clown to
The
the
Problems
world, Eric?
Clown is it's one of those inspirational kind of like boomer bait memes where this guy he's standing on there's two cliffs, okay? There's like a higher cliff on the left and then a lower cliff on the right, and there's kind of a chasm between the two. And on the right hand side there's like a silhouette of a guy standing there just looking depressed, and he's got his back facing towards the other cliff, because on the other cliff there is a clown throwing like hatchets, like hand axes into this dude's back, and it says problems, like that the guy is labeled problems. And then on the right hand side the silhouette of a woman enters, and it's like wife, and she puts up her hand to make a barrier to stop the hatchets from going into the man's back, and then zaps the clown with a laser.
But why is it a clown? I don't understand the clown.
And like,
this is
I don't think I fully internalized how ridiculous this GIF is until I had to describe it out loud. Like, yeah, see, there's a clown with hatchets, and the wife puts up a barrier. And I think ultimately the thing you're supposed to take away from it is like, oh, wife destroy problem. I love this for me.
Right,
but,
wife.
Yeah,
wife
yeah,
good.
Wife good. Wife destroy problem clown.
But it explains a lot. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Somebody recently messaged saying they missed. Someone recently messaged saying they missed Eric's internet corner, and well, there you go. It's back now. Only when Cat's not here.
Space Jam DVD. Space Jam DVD.
Criminal Justice in the chat says clown with hatchets is a thing we know. We're all running with the hatchets.
You can run with a hatchet.
Yeah. It's
Was that like a Juggalo dog whistle?
Fucking magnets, how do they work? I know that's old, and that's such an old meme now, but it's one of my favorite things in the world. For the whole summer, we were just like, fucking whatever, how does it work?
yeah, magnets, man. Disco Elysium, I don't know. I think this is a game that, number one, it's like heavily discounted in the ongoing Steam spring sale right now, so you should go check that out if you like. But Disco Elysium is a game that we recently like named one of the best games of all time, or not all time, but like the last decade, one of the best RPGs of the last decade. And I'm really interested in the idea of more people discovering it and checking it out, but it's the idea of it's all of the stuff around Zaum, right? It's all of the ongoing fallout. It's all of those developers going off to start their own studios or go work on other projects because this one thing that managed to happen at one point in time eventually broke under the weight of, well, make more money, create more goods for the consumer economy. In some ways, that's kind of incredible. That's kind of the thing that would only happen around an amazing piece of art like Disco Elysium. But I think trying to recreate that experience and turn it into something else, I don't know. There's something about like, I want people to experience Disco Elysium the way that Disco Elysium was made to be experienced, and the sort of repackaging it's cool, it's neat, but it reminds me a little bit of the efforts to like How to Train Your Dragon, where they're just re-releasing that movie and it's a live action movie, but it's the same movie, it's the same thing. Why are you watching this versus the original How to Train Your Dragon? I don't understand. Just go do the original. So that's my 2 cents on Disco Elysium. It's just like, go play the original. It's incredible. There's no reason. I can't think of a reason why somebody would be like, oh, I have to play it on my phone. I have to check it out on my phone. I won't check it out on the Switch.
Is when you have a publisher or studio, whoever says they're going to, the first thing in their mind is social media, not how does this game play? How does this work? How does the story? How to make this work for this platform? It's just, we want someone to slice this up in little bites so that some other moron can sit on impose themselves on top of it and go, whoa, what is that? Like, that's just what they want to make Disco Elysium into, and you can't do that organically. You're going to destroy the product if you do that.
Mm-hmm.
I think that game really excels in the moments where it kind of asks you to like slow down and really engage with like a moment. There are like really great moments in Disco Elysium where stuff just kind of happens, even when you're in the middle of a different conversation and you just kind of get lost in your own thoughts for a second, and you like have an epiphany or you have a revelation or you just kind of go somewhere else for a bit. And I worry with talking about TikTok. TikTok is like, when I think of what the appeal there is and what the platform there is, it's bite-sized, it's quick, it's get the thing, move on to the next one. And even though TikTok has kind of historically gotten longer as time has gone on, there's a lot more like 3-minute TikToks, 5-minute TikToks nowadays that I'm like, what are y'all doing out here? But like Vine and things like that, like short form video, that is kind of what I associate with those platforms. And I worry that's kind of what is happening here, is they're going to end up creating this version where it's like, no, just keep moving forward. Just flick the dice, move forward, advance the story. And I don't know that it's going to have the same hit in some of those moments if you're just kind of flicking through it like that. So I don't know. Disco Elysium. We have a chatter message. Will it be an ideal experience? Of course not, but I don't think a new audience being exposed to a masterpiece is a bad thing. I don't disagree with you. I will say that. I don't disagree with you. My main thing is that I also think we're past the point in time where there are people who play video games but only on their phone. I think like video games have become ubiquitous enough, and also like platforms to play them on have become ubiquitous enough that you can play this stuff on a lot of things. Like you can emulate video games on your phone all the time. You can do like, you can play apps on there, sure, but I know a lot of people who stream stuff to their phones through like PlayStation and things like, or Steam Deck, or have like the backbone controllers and stuff, or they have Switches, or they have laptops, they have computers, gaming rigs that they bought during the pandemic. I feel like a lot of people who play video games nowadays own the hardware to be able to play something like Disco Elysium, and I don't know that the world exists where there's somebody who's like, well, I want to play something like Disco Elysium, but I only play video games on my phone. And I think that it's a very narrow subset that doesn't exist. It existed for a while. There was a time where people played things like that, but I think that time is kind of gone. I don't know.
Well, like I said earlier, it's just like I don't object to the idea of Disco Elysium being on the phone. It's just cutting it up specifically for the TikTok generation to consume on their phones, like, 1 minute at a time. Something about that, maybe they have some kind of incredible talent to make it work, but I just don't see any pathway in which it would be great for Disco Elysium.
Honestly, my thought is kind of like, in practicality, what this kind of sounds like is we're porting Disco Elysium to mobile, we're messing with the UI a little bit. Yeah. And then we have our little, moron CEO dancing out to say buzzwords to make the shareholders, dance for their treats.
Yeah.
So he's just like, TikTok. And they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I know that word.
That could be the outcome. And honestly, if that's the outcome, then I'm a little bit more interested, because there's a part of me that likes the novelty of the mobile adaptation, the Final Fantasy XV Pocket Edition and all that. So,
I remember that. That was on the Switch as well.
Yeah, what a time. What a time. Other stuff that's happening in the Tavern right now. Final Fantasy XIV patch 7.2. It arrives on March 25th. A lot of the big stuff in this patch is actually coming later. We're getting the MSQ and a lot of the raid, like normal tier raid stuff up front on March 25th, but Cosmic Exploration is arriving on April 22nd. That is the gathering, crafting, moon base stuff. And then Occult Crescent arrives on May 27th with patch 7.25. That is the Baja, Eureka, etc. I'm sure Victor will chime in here to correct me if I'm wrong about any of this, but it's we'll probably talk more about it because Dropouts is coming back, y'all.
I'm back, baby.
Get excited. We'll talk about it more there, so I don't want to burn too much pod right now on the weekly, but I'm excited for this. I feel like this is the moment that I've been waiting for when it comes to Dawntrail's post-patch stuff. It's the big ticket stuff that they've been teasing for a while now, and I'm pretty curious to see what they do with it. But I am also like, 14 has been in a weird place for me in my life in this last like year or so, because I feel like with Dawntrail I've really been living the log on, do the MSQ, disappear for 4 months, and then come back at a future point in time. I know that 14 has always kind of been that game, but it feels like the gaps between patches have been a little bit more noticeable this time, where I've been spending more time just playing the game, getting the stuff done, and then leaving, and like rarely coming back to just kind of like poke away at something in the interim. I don't know if that's changed for you at all, Nadia, but that's kind of where I've been.
It's a matter of Final Fantasy XIV, I've been playing for a few years now, and I never have a problem just like taking a few months off and doing something else, especially if I have another game in the works. Like right now, FF14 is kind of fallen a bit by the wayside because I got, Cyberpunk, I got Monster Hunter, but I always kind of get excited around when the Moogle Tombstone quests come around, and you know that, okay, it's time to start getting in that grinding mindset again. That I'd be doing more of that, but I am busy with other games. But that's typically what happens with me, because I am not like a big raid person. I am not a big, like, I gotta do this, like, savage, whatever. I am totally happy with, like, popping in once in a while, doing the story. I like where the story is going. I think I saw Beatrix. I saw her use, like, some kind of rose attack that looked incredible. So there's been criticism about the writing in Final Fantasy XIV and Dawntrail. I think it's good. I think, Eric, you and I have talked about this many, many times, but there are people who can't handle the fact that your warrior of light is not in the center of the spotlight in a foreign land where they have been asked to be a guest, and maybe there's someone else who governs this land and you're not in the middle of it this time. Maybe you're a mentor. And understandably, like, maybe that makes some people a little bit, prickly, because they do have, like, cannons for their warrior of light and whatnot. And I have seen some complaints about, like, really, really high level stuff, not like, this, and that. Like, I don't really pay attention to that. Final Fantasy XIV is a huge world. It's really what you make of it. And it's really, I think Yoshida himself has said, if you want to take a break, take a break. This is not a game that has dailies where you check in. You have, like, your weekly stuff if you want to build up a character. There's always crafting to do. Like, I really want that Ronique as a mount, which is, like, an insane amount of gathering. But sometimes I also just like doing fates. I like grinding fates when I need something to do when I'm, like, nervous or anxious. I like doing that. And I find the new maps have some of the most incredible music that has been put out to date. And, like, the Heritage Found in the daytime is just such an incredible song. It has that, like, crashing piano to it. And the Shaolin, I can't remember the name off the top of my head right now, but the Western map, the nighttime theme is just so gorgeous. So I had a point, I'm sure, but the point is, FF14 is just, if you got to take a break from it, you have people say, oh, dead game, whatever. It's like, no, this is the way it's supposed to be. Here's the Tombstone event to kind of get you back into the grinding mindset. We're going to have, our story paths. We're going to have our whatever. And as you said, Eric, that's going to be staggered out. I really want the moon base. I'm someone who really developed the island to the max. So I'm all for this. And it's like, I saw they had a mount that's like a bulldozer. I'm like, holy shit, it's a bulldozer. I want that. So
they have
I'm
mechs. They have mechs on the moon. I want the mechs.
They have mechs on the moon, man. Yeah. So there's, people are, for all the, all we talk about how, developers need to kind of take it easier, and, maybe it's not that important that we have content jammed down our ass every 4 seconds. I don't find myself wanting to worry about where Final Fantasy XIV is going, and, like, I don't think about the numbers. I don't really engage with the fandom, because there's wonderful people in the fandom, but there's also people who are just, like, angry all the time at, like, things that there's just no point in being angry at. So, yeah, I know where you are for sure, but it's just not something that worries me. I know I'll be back.
I think the thing with Final Fantasy XIV specifically that I do find interesting is that, like, okay, like you said, the end game stuff, the high level, all of the, like, I want to play this game for a really long time and get to the highest level. Some people have had some issues with that, but I feel like it ends up coinciding with a lot of the complaints that we hear, where people are like, oh, games don't come out often enough, or there's no good games to play. And I'm looking around at all the games I have on my backlog and stuff like that. I'm like, what are you talking about? But it is that idea of people end up saying they want this forever game. They want this live service game that can just give them everything. I think Kat always calls it, like, the holodeck game. And the idea, the idea that you can just play one thing, and that one thing will satisfy all your gaming needs, and it will provide. And I think even when I say like, oh, Final Fantasy XIV hasn't been holding me in its grasp quite the way that it has been the last couple of years, that's accurate, and I also don't think it's a bad thing. To be clear, like it's fine. I'm having a little bit of a longer break from 14 than I usually do. And it's through no real fault of the game outside of maybe some of this content stuff arriving a little bit later than I'd hoped it would. I was kind of hoping that this is a good window for cosmic exploration to arrive versus like later on where it's going to be, I think April 22nd is right before Clair Obscure comes out. And I'm like, no!
Of course it does that. Yeah. No, there's something... one thing about Yoshida that I like about him and I like about developers like him is that he wants you to play other games. He doesn't want you to be here like, oh my god, Final Fantasy XIV, I gotta hang on to this like every second. He plays games. Remember, like he delayed the the Dawn Trail expansion because, what was it, Elden Ring? The DLC came out?
It might have been. Like that sounds right, yeah.
Yeah, because he was like, because I'm gonna be playing that. So you have a week. And I just really respect developers who are like that because that's a developer who just likes games. I want you to like games, even if it's not their game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, speaking of games, Lucas, have you been playing any? What have you been up to besides Atelier?
Yeah. So, I'm always playing something for work. But I would like to highlight Wizardry variant Daphne. Because that just hit Steam recently.
Let's go.
It's a gacha game, but it rules. Holy crap. Man. Wizardry right now is so cool. Like the people who own the rights now are just like absolute degenerates in a way that's really appealing to me. They're like their whole thing seems to be like, it's actually kind of absurd that people think like going into a dungeon and fighting things for money is like a fun and cool and happy time. Like that shit should be scary.
It is. Wizardry is terrifying.
And so now that we have Wizardry, we're going to make it scary. And this game is just wild. Like the opening sequence is like you just wake up in this empty dungeon and you're like down to your last bit of health. And you can barely see, and this monster starts stalking you, and like your heartbeat starts going, and you can barely see the monster, and it just hunts you down, and it like corners you and just murders you. And then like as the opening credits are going, you're watching your body like decompose and then get looted by like kobolds and stuff.
Cool.
And it's just like, whoa.
That's the intro?
That's the intro. It's so cool. And like it's just like it's a full-on classic Wizardry game in every way. You're not getting like tripped over by like, all right, now you have to give us money if you want to keep going. It's got character pulls. It's got some like other wacky stuff, but it's really like on the side. And it's like it's got a story with a beginning and then kind of it's visually really cool. Like it's got the horror vibes all the way throughout. It has permadeath, which is really funny.
Yeah, I was going to ask if it has that, if it's doing gacha pulls and character pulls, how does it handle some of the normal Wizardry stuff that we expect?
It's in there as like a bit. Like it's really hard to do. And they go out of your way to like warn you. It's like, if you keep pushing this character, it's gonna die. If you spent like $2,000 to get it, maybe you should like let it rest for a minute. Like, please.
Wow.
But they're like committed to it being a Wizardry game in that way.
So let me get this straight. You pull a gacha character that you potentially spend money on, and it can die forever.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That is amazing. Okay, gacha's good. Gacha's finally good, everyone.
Oh, that kind of owns.
So funny. It does. And
that's gonna make some people really poor.
Yeah, and like I said, it's like really hard to actually hit that point. Like you have to like you really have to put this character through some stuff to get to that point.
Go through run through the tunnel of mashing mallets, please.
All right, young cat boy that I spent $50 rolling for. Time to go back into the gauntlet.
It's like, no, I paid $2,000 for this thief, and I'm going to open every treasure chest with this thief. What,
Wow, that sounds actually
40
intriguing.
explosions later.
And then they die. It's my waifu.
Oh no, my
It's so
waifu was
cool.
eaten by a mimic. Now my waifu is the mimic. Now my mimic is the waifu.
Oh no, my
Two
waifu was
waifus.
eaten by a mimic, and
Holy
now
shit,
my
two
waifu
waifus.
is a mimic.
It's my new light novel series.
Yeah, we just invented the sickest isekai of the next 3 anime seasons. Look forward to my waifu is a mimic. Oh,
Give me money.
That's a really good pitch, though. That's a really good pitch. Can someone get Kadakawa on the line?
Oh my god.
Where is he in press?
I've been basically hyper fixating on DRPGs for like 2 years now. And Wizardry especially has been fun to look into, but just where it is now, they got the creator of Goblin Slayer to do a light novel series about Wizardry.
Oh no, really?
Oh,
Wow.
Yeah.
Goblin Slayer.
Yeah.
I read like a chapter, and I read past the infamous chapter, and I was still like, this is kind of a depressing, sad series. I don't know if I like this.
Oh yeah, that man is unhinged, but he knows Wizardry, and you can tell.
I really want to. Is
They're
it
good
Ryoko Kui, who does Delicious in Dungeon, is apparently a huge Wizardry and Pathfinder
100%.
and Baldur's Gate fan. I would love to see that take, because you can, when you read Dungeon Meshi, you see the influence from Wizardry in there.
100%.
What if they
so, yeah.
brought in like dungeon meshi polls for the game?
Oh, that'd be sick.
Yo,
She actually, I forget. So a lot of Wizardry and other DRPGs on PC will actually let you import character art for like your party, and I forget where it is. I've seen it, but she's made like a sheet of portraits that you can go out and download and use in your Wizardry games. Like she's
cool.
a sicko. Yeah,
I have one of the Baldur's Gate sheets, I think, saved somewhere, because if I ever get around to playing the early Baldur's Gate, not Baldur's Gate 3, but like Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, if I ever get around to finally sitting down and playing those, I have those. Cool. Wizardry variants Daphne. Sounds sick as hell. We're almost done here, but Nadia, you did say that you finished Monster Hunter. I want to hear some thoughts.
Oh yeah, I mean, I just rolled the credits.
The first credits, correct?
The first credits, right. So, of course, the game goes on after that. There's, it's a weird world. Someone needs to explore it. So that's what I've been doing. Right now I'm being told to increase my hunter rank. And I'm guessing after that the story resumes, because I have to, So I was hunting the Kangala, because now that you've rolled first credits, you can get a whole bunch of high-level armor and start hunting for that. So before the show, I killed Fart Ape twice, and I'm going to go back and kill Fart Ape again, because I need that Kangala Pelt Plus.
Oh, you're in it now. You're so in it now.
Monster. But I have to stop, because I do need to get back to Cyberpunk, and I do want to get back to Cyberpunk, so I'm going to, are we doing Monhan Mondays on this Monday? I can't remember.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe. We might do a community night. I think that might be the plan. Is we don't have a normal afternoon slot where we bring a guest on and all that. We might just say, hey, Nadia and I are going to be on, and we'll have the stream on, and then we'll just play with members of the community and through the Blood God squad and all that. We do have a squad. You can head to the Discord and get info on that if you would like, so you can squad up with us. But yeah, I'm so glad you're in the thick of it with Monhunt, because that's where it just becomes the game that everybody goes sicko over. Is all right, time to go punch this monster until it gives me the parts I need. I need 3 more horns. Let's do this.
Really satisfying when you're running away, the monster's on your ass and you're running for your life, and then holy shit, there's a Rathian just out of nowhere. Suddenly they're beefing and you're just standing by the side going, Yee!
How did a Balahara get here?
I don't know, but it's good timing.
A bunch of squad hunting. Oh, a bunch of the squad is hunting right now. Criminal Justice says, the squad is always hunting. The squad is always moving.
Beat those monsters. Yeah, beat those monsters. Beat those motherfuckers.
Well, Monster Hunter continues to be Monster Hunter, and the pit continues to be the pit. So, Nadia, why don't you take us home?
I actually want to kind of revise something that we did last week in the pre-show, so I'm kind of sorry if I'm recycling it all. But I kind of came up with a good question, and Eric, you know the answer to this already, so you got to shut up. But Lucas, I want you to think. You've seen Bill and Ted, right? At Excellence Adventure. So you know the infamous scene where everyone's in the mall, right? Kind of doing their own thing.
Yeah.
Now, when I was a child, there was one scene in that mall that made me just destroy myself with laughter. Can you guess which character was my favorite during the mall scene? There are two answers. I will accept two answers, but
Gosh, I have no idea. It has admittedly been a long time since
it has probably been long. Do you remember the part of the movie where Genghis Khan is in those parts?
Oh, yeah.
And he takes the bat and just slugs some mannequin's head off its shoulders, and the topper for me was that it goes into the basketball net, and the basketball net buzzes as if someone did a slam dunk.
Incredible.
And I just thought to myself, well, that's a good test to see who you are as a human being, where you are, what is your favorite sequence of that whole movie, or sorry, that whole what is your favorite part of that whole sequence? Because it wasn't just that; it was also the bit where Joan of Arc takes over the exercise session, and she just pushes that other chick out of the way, and she's doing the whole bit, and she's got a huge ass cross on her. Where did you get that uniform? And as a kid, I'm dying, because back then there wasn't a lot of representation for women, so Joan of Arc was kind of cool representation for me, going absolutely crazy doing this exercise show, and that's why representation is important, because that's the best I could do in the 80s. And in fact, when the movie was almost over, my brother was watching, and he says to my mom, why are they sending Joan of Arc back? They're going to burn her alive. And I was because I had no idea who the hell Joan of Arc was.
Oh, no.
So that's why representation is important. That's why according to the pit rules.
I always forget about that part, that you didn't know what happens to Joan of Arc. It's like walking into the passion and being well, I hope that everything goes well for that guy.
This Christ gent seems like a nice fellow. He has some good ideas. I'm sure everyone will listen rationally. Oh no, it's all gone horribly wrong somehow. Oh no, pilot, how could you?
Seeing the Titanic, man, I just love movies about big boats.
What a great boat. Oh shit. When my brother took my dad to see Titanic when it was in the theaters, and he says to my dad, okay, here's the secret. Fall asleep for the first half of the movie, and when the ship starts to sink, wake up.
Oh no.
God, it is a lot of movie where the ship is not sinking. It's the ship sinking to not sinking ratio in Titanic is crazy compared to the Poseidon Adventure or whatever. The ship sinking ratio is all off.
But Poseidon Adventure doesn't have a sex scene in the back of a Model T.
No, and that would have made the Poseidon Adventure better if the ship was sinking while that was happening.
2 VHS tapes. That's right, Criminal Justice. That was two.
Yeah.
2 VHS tapes. Man.
Crazy.
It takes a whole first tape.
Jesus Christ.
Can you imagine being you're watching Titanic at home? I never had this experience, because by the time I was watching Titanic, it was on a DVD and all that kind of stuff. But you're watching Titanic at home, and you have to switch out the VHS tape. And I really hope that the cut between the tapes was oh, that looks like an iceberg out there. Please put in tape 2.
I'm just imagining the scene in, I think it's Final Fantasy XIV or 8, when it's please change the disc, and you get the splash screen with the sword in the ground.
Yeah.
I'm just imagining the boat sticking out of the water.
All aboard the sailboat. Please tape 2.
Please change the tape 2.
That's really good, actually. Just a really artsy picture of the Titanic humping the iceberg. Please change it.
It's the boomer disc change. Yeah.
Oh, fun fact, Joan of Arc and Bill and Ted is played by a member of the Go-Go's. That's hilarious. I love that.
Oh, that
all right, we got to end this before we get further than boomer disc change. That's going to be it for this week of Axe of the Blood God. Don't worry, we will be back to a full cast, I believe, next week, I think. I'm not 100% sure on that, but maybe. But we'll all get together again. I don't know what our topic will be. We'll probably talk about more RPGs. But as always, stay tuned to us here at Axe of the Blood God, patreon.com/bloodgodpod. You can find us on all of the Patreons and socials and our excellent Discord. Lucas, why don't you plug some stuff real quick?
Sure. You can find me on Blue Sky at Hokuto Lucas. My writing is going to be on Shack News and Restart, the Walmart website. I reviewed WWE 2K25 there, and I reviewed Atelier Yumia at Shack News. So please feel free to give those a read.
Heck yes, you can find us on all the socials as well. Please go do that. Please go support Lucas and all the things that he does, and support all of our wonderful guests, and I don't know, follow all our content and stuff. We have a lot of stuff coming up. Monhun Mondays, the eventual return of the retro streams, one day, maybe in the future. And of course,
someday,
more weekly episodes and all that. But for now, for Nadia, for Lucas, for myself, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time on Axe of the Blood God.